His name was Gary Willis.
An Anne Arundel County man is dead after officers say he refused to give up his gun to police.
Officers shot and killed him at his home this morning where they were attempting to enforce the new red flag law.
WGC is live near the scene in Ferndale. Kimberly Eaton is updating this developing situation. Kimberly.
And Vic, police just left this Ferndale neighborhood now nearly 12 hours after officers first showed up here to attempt to remove guns from a home and ended up shooting and killing the gun owner. County police say they came to a home on Linwood Avenue near Broadview Boulevard to take weapons from 60-year-old Gary Willis. They say 2 officers knocked on the door and Willis answered. Sergeant Jacqueline Davis says at first he put the gun down and stepped outside to talk with police.
He was fine with the officers until they told him, hey, we're serving you with this order, and this order orders us from the court to take your guns.
At that point, she says Willis went for his gun, one of the officers trying to grab it out of his hand.
All right, I know most of you are aware of this, that it happened. I know it's not necessarily news as it happened months ago, but we need to remind the senators in the Senate Judiciary Committee what happened to Gary Willis due to a red flag law. The man wasn't a legitimate threat. Now, we can't really know the exact details of why the red flag order was granted because, wouldn't you guess it, that's secret. The Maryland Judiciary denied a request to see any and all requests for protection orders made at the residence on Linwood Avenue, citing the law, which states that anything related to an order is confidential unless the court rules otherwise. So, can't find out why police were coming to his house to take his guns. You'll just have to take their word that there was a good reason for it. But the man's niece, Michelle Willis, was interviewed by the news and didn't want to appear on camera because she was so upset, said that police came to his house to take his guns because it was just family being family, in her words. She said one of her aunts requested a protective order to remove Gary Willis's guns. His niece said that her uncle liked to speak his mind, but described him as harmless. She said, "I'm just dumbfounded right now. My uncle wouldn't hurt anybody." So there you see, it's already turned deadly. But meanwhile, you have some Republicans in the Senate Judiciary Committee wanting to say things like this. People like Lindsey Graham.
There are a lot of people may be worried, is the government going to come take your guns? And the answer is no. Nobody's going to come and take a gun from you. But there will be a process for law enforcement and family members to petition a court to say that somebody in your neighborhood or somebody down the street or across town is about to blow.
Well, that is a big fat lie. Really? No one's going to come take your guns?
Told him, hey, we're serving you with this order, and this order orders us from the court to take your guns. Orders us from the court to take your guns.
Huh. That's funny. I thought Lindsey Graham said that no one was going to come take your guns.
These are particularly dangerous because not only do we know there's weapons involved, we're also taking the weapons.
In this case, it led to gunfire before dawn on this otherwise quiet street.
So it looks like Senator Lindsey Graham is being a little dishonest when he says no one's coming to take your guns. Even some conservatives, like Ted Cruz, even Ted Cruz is starting to signal he's willing to compromise on red flag gun confiscation. This is not good, folks. We need to get active like we did in 2013. This is unacceptable. We will not tolerate it, and we will replace these people in office and primary them out of office. How has Senator Lindsey Graham not been primaried out by the people of South Carolina? How does he remain in office with his warmongering and his willing to compromise on gun control? How does this keep happening? People need to wake up. And these are the kind of people here, when Senator Ted Cruz is talking, these are the kind of people they're entertaining here at their red flag gun confiscation hearing. These are the people they're wanting to appeal to. Not me and you, who have jobs and who pay our taxes and who try to be responsible citizens and who care about our freedoms. No, they want to pander to these people who have nothing better to do than to demand we give up our rights and say we should be like New Zealand and act like this in the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing.
I was in Sutherland Springs and Santa Fe in the hours following those shooters.
End gun terror. End gun terror.
Please,
Either
sit down or be
for
removed.
your leadership. Thank you. Thank you, Jacinda Ardern, for your leadership. End gun terror. End gun terror.
Yeah, she's thanking the dictator of New Zealand there for saying they're just going to ban guns and take people's semi-auto guns.
Prime Minister Ernst, do something. People are dying. You're killing them.
But that's the people that they want to, appeal to, apparently. Not me and you. They apparently care more about these crazy people who want to take your rights away. And here's where Ted Cruz starts to signal that he's open to maybe supporting red flag gun confiscation, if it's done the right way with the NRA support, of course.
There is a great deal more we should do, but the right approach, I think, is targeting and focusing on bad guys. And I do think that extreme risk laws of the kind we're discussing can potentially be part of the solution set. That targeting those that pose an extreme risk, that have serious mental illness and pose a threat to themselves or others, is a law enforcement tool that can be helpful in preventing crimes of violence. Now, as has been noted by several witnesses, policymakers have to balance the need to protect the public safety with also the obligation to protect constitutional rights and to protect civil rights. And so, Mr. Koppel, I wanted to ask you, in your view, what are minimum protections that an extreme risk law should have to ensure that to comport with due process?
Sure. Use of ex parte proceedings only on a finding of necessity, as we have in Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 65. You can't.
And basically, this guy here is pretty much the guy shilling for the NRA stance of supporting red flag laws. Well, we want, red flag laws, but only a certain way. And then even then they talk about removing the ex parte part where they can take it out while you're not even present. However, even there he says that maybe they should be there for extreme circumstances. So, it's not like the government ever likes to paint, someone as extreme, right? And this same guy here was being grilled by anti-gunner Dick Durbin, and he, when he's pretty much saying how, I support these laws, that's why I'm here. When I guess Dick Durbin didn't like the fact that this guy wasn't pushing, for stricter red flag gun confiscation laws. And of course,
obtained 126 orders
there pushing
and
for this.
Confiscated 318 guns, including 33 assault weapons.
See, so you have her there pushing this. She's all happy about it, teaming up with people like Lindsey Graham. These are the people that we call Republicans who needs Democrats, right?
This is someone who is clearly in a position where they should never own a firearm. I also want to say a word about your comments on domestic violence abusers. You have some pretty strongly stated views here about abusers abusing this system. And yet when it comes to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, they support these laws, which are a vital tool to protect people experiencing crises that make it temporarily unsafe for them to possess firearms. These are the experts on the subject. They don't buy your point of view.
Well, I support these laws too, Senator. That's why I'm here testifying.
And, the NRA, which some people said he was there for the NRA. I don't know if he was or not, but, these supposedly pro-gun Republicans could have had someone who has done legitimate research on the issue actually testify. The NRA could have had someone like John Lott actually testify. Here, Dr. John Lott and Professor Carl Moody have done new research on the red flag laws. And they said basically that red flag laws have no significant effect on murder, suicide, the number of people killed in mass public shootings, robbery, aggravated assault, or burglary. There is some evidence that rape rates rise. These laws apparently do not save lives. The information needed to replicate tables and robustness checks for paper is available here. And you can click on the link, and this is on crimepreventionresearchcenter.org. The red flag laws in California didn't stop the Thousand Oaks massacre just this past fall. It still happened despite the fact that they were one of the first states to have red flag laws on the books, other than Connecticut and Indiana. It didn't stop the Thousand Oaks massacre from happening, and it didn't stop Sandy Hook. Connecticut has had a red flag law since 1999, and that still did not stop Sandy Hook from occurring. One of the most tragic mass murders in recent history. And there's really no need for red flag laws. Already the laws on the books, if someone is adjudicated to be mentally defective to the point where they're a danger to themselves or others, they can have their right to own or possess a firearm restricted. That law's already on the books, but the person has to be adjudicated in a court of law. So why do we need to expand it to a red flag process? And if the person is still free, they're still a danger. Even one of the sheriffs that testified in this committee hearing, Sheriff Rick Bradshaw, said they can use pressure cookers, cars, homemade explosives, things like that to do damage, to harm people. So if the person's still free, how is it helping anything to show up at their house and say, hey, we're taking your guns, don't do anything bad after we leave, when if they really want, they can still find a way to illegally acquire firearms, whether it be stealing them from someone else or buying them from off the street from somebody, or they can just find another means like using cars, explosives, things like that, using knives. That's happened in countries like China with very strict gun control laws. They can, if the person that's so dangerous that you need to take their guns is still free, taking their guns isn't doing anything. It could potentially make the situation worse. In my state and in my county in particular, our sheriff's department has made arrests on people who have clearly made threats to the public or threats to schools. They have arrested the person, even if it was a juvenile. So there's things that can be done. And in Parkland, Florida, there's things that could have been done there. They could have made an arrest for him making terroristic threats. They didn't. They could have had him mentally adjudicated. They didn't, because the police considered him, quote, low risk, unquote. But they didn't. They didn't do any of that. So now they want to pass more laws that I guarantee you will be ripe for abuse. And they say that only family members and law enforcement, it's for family members and law enforcement just to get these red flag gun confiscation orders. That, you know, you can trust them, law enforcement and family members. But as you saw there in Maryland, that resulted from a petty family dispute, according to his niece, is what resulted in that man having his guns taken and essentially resulting in him being killed. And furthermore, law enforcement, anybody can go to law enforcement. People try to get their neighbors or people they have a grudge against in trouble all the time with us. Now, people can talk about false reports and things like that, and oh, well, there'll be protections for people making false reports. They'll have to swear under oath, and you know, they'll have to face a severe penalty, whether it be a fine or jail time. You can say that all day, but as it stands now, how often do rapes or how often do people who falsely report rape actually get prosecuted? How many times do people making false complaints against law enforcement officers get prosecuted? Or if you look at the Jussie Smollett case that was all over the media lately, look at him. He falsely reported a hate crime. He staged a hate crime. And look, his charges are getting dropped. So you can't rely on the system to make sure that justice is brought to you because someone made a false report about you. They can try to comfort you and make you feel better about it, but that's all it is to make you feel better. Oh, don't worry. Well, if someone makes a false report against you, well, they'll have to face severe penalties, so no one would ever do it because they'll be afraid to. No, they won't, because they see how often people get away with making false reports. And furthermore, proving that someone knowingly made a false report is pretty hard to do. It's not an easy thing to prove. You have to catch them in a way that shows they made the report knowing that what they were saying is false. It's hard to prosecute people making false reports. Yeah, it happens sometimes, but a lot of the time, as you saw there with the Jussie Smollett thing, charges get dropped. It's something that's hard to prove, hard to prosecute. So that shouldn't really comfort you. And I can guarantee you that red flag gun confiscation orders will be abused. They already have been abused. In Maryland, that was one example. Now that man is dead. He can never get his life back. All because a red flag gun confiscation order got issued. I mean, how many times have anti-gunners swatted people or threatened to swat people, make false calls about them? There was that incident a few years back where a guy in Virginia was swatted for open carry. Now, say what you want about open carry, but the point is the anti-gunners are willing to do that to gun owners. In Vermont, where some teenagers apparently planned to commit a school shooting and murder some of their fellow students. And when that conversation was overheard amongst these little scumbags that were planning to do this, they mentioned that they planned on getting a relative's gun. So law enforcement officers showed up and took the relative's gun, which says was locked up. So the man whose guns they took wasn't even a threat. He wasn't even suspected of committing a crime or going to commit a crime or anything like that. His relatives or nephew, whatever it was talking about it. So I thought it was pretty odd that Dave Kopel, that he thought Vermont had the model red flag law, considering that Vermont's red flag law doesn't offer you due process. You're not there at the hearing. They have the hearing, then they come take your guns just like every other red flag law. They make it seem like, oh, well, if it's not a big deal, you can appeal it and get your guns back, or, after, 6 months or a year, depending on, what time frame they're doing, you can get your guns back. And you're just supposed to somehow be okay with not only having your right to bear arms and your right to defend yourself infringed upon, but the government taking your property that you lawfully bought out the door without your consent and without due process. I mean, some people have thousands of dollars invested in their firearms. Some people have over $1,000 invested in one firearm. And you're just supposed to be okay with thousands of dollars of your property walking out the door because someone made allegations against you when you haven't been convicted of a crime, when you haven't been adjudicated in a court of law as being mentally defective. This is insane. And that's not to, even mention some of the other headache that comes along with this. Even after you do get your rights back, if you do, you got to trust that the government didn't neglect your firearms. There's reports out there of people who have had their guns taken because they were suspected of a crime, or maybe it was a self-defense shooting and their gun was confiscated as part of the investigation. And they may or may not have gotten their gun back. Or if they did, maybe it was rusted. Maybe the government didn't take care of it. The whole point is you shouldn't have to be stripped of your rights over allegations and without due process and have to deal with all that headache. And then the hope of that you're taken out of NICS. So then you go to buy a new gun, maybe to replace one that got lost or damaged, and you're still prohibited from buying out of NICS because they didn't take your name out yet. Even for some people who never were in NICS in the first place, they get false positives and get wrongful denials, and they have to go through the headache of getting their name removed or clearing up that they're not the other person with the same name that is barred or is a prohibited person. So just things like that to think about. But this process will be abused. Not just, from anti-gun people swatting people, but from jealous ex-spouses, or an ex-spouse or an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend with a grudge. I see orders of protection get abused. Now, it doesn't happen most of the time, but it does happen from time to time, which is more than it should. And Lindsey Graham wants to say, oh, well, if it saves just one life. Well, as we've shown here, that it didn't save any lives in those states that had red flag laws where mass murder still happened with a firearm. So it doesn't save lives, but it infringes on the rights of some people. In Florida, within months of the law being passed, 450 people in the state of Florida had their guns confiscated. That's almost 500 people. You're telling me that there's 500 people that pose that legitimate of a threat to the public? And, an abusive ex-spouse or ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend could use this to disarm their victim, especially seeing as how some abusers like to do the tactic called gaslighting, which is basically where they try to make their victim think they're crazy. So I could certainly see this being used by an abusive ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend or ex-spouse to disarm their intended victim. And then once their victim is disarmed, if they're successful in making them appear crazy or making them appear like they're a threat, then moving in for their attack. It's not right. We have too much government involvement in firearms and firearms ownership, regulating a right that is supposed to not be infringed and is specifically protected in the U.S. Constitution. We have enough infringements, too many. And now they're wanting to infringe even more. This is very dangerous legislation. It has resulted in the death of one man already in a left-leaning state like Maryland. This ain't even in a state yet like Alabama, Tennessee, Idaho, Montana, more of a pro-gun state where people value the right to own firearms more. So it's already resulted in the death of one man in a state like Maryland. It should be fairly obvious that this is going to turn into disaster. So please, call these senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee and call them out on their lies, because what Lindsey Graham said about they're not talking about taking people's guns is a blatant lie. That's what it is. Red flag gun confiscation, or as they call it, extreme risk protection orders, where they can get a court order to take your gun when you haven't been convicted of a crime, haven't been afforded due process. That's what they want to do, and he wants to lie and say they're not talking about taking your guns. That's exactly what the legislation is about. So let them know that you see through their lies, and go to your sheriff. Where you live, go to your sheriffs and ask them where they stand on it, if they're going to go along with red flag gun confiscation. Because there's plenty of sheriffs, or there's quite a few, who said they weren't. A lot of sheriffs in Colorado said they will not enforce red flag if it becomes law. Then there's sheriffs in New Mexico, same thing. There's some gun control packages which include red flag gun confiscation in New Mexico. Some sheriffs there are saying they will not enforce red flag gun confiscation. So get active, call these senators and let them know you see through their lies. And if you want to watch the whole hearing on red flag gun confiscation, you can I'm going to post a C-SPAN link below in the description, as well as a link to Gun Owners of America to take action. But I would personally either email them or add your own comments to the Gun Owners of America method, or their link and their pre-written message, and let them know that red flag gun confiscation is dangerous, unconstitutional, and unacceptable. If you want to go to gunowners.org, you can use their website to take action. All you gotta do is go to their website, gunowners.org, scroll down to national alerts, click on national alerts, and then you'll see right here, some Republicans now want gun confiscation. Click on that, and then you'll have two ways to contact them. I would strongly recommend doing both. You can type in your information here and then go to next, where it'll take you to the pre-written message to email them about opposing red flag gun confiscation. And then you can scroll down and you can type in their information, and it'll pop up their phone numbers and give you a script to read off of if you want to call them and tell them why they should oppose red flag gun confiscation. But again, I would mention the fact that Lindsey Graham is lying, and how it's resulted in the death of one man because they came to take his guns, and how it's resulted in a Vermont man having his guns taken for his relatives making threats. Not him, his relatives. And I would specifically mention those things because they need to know that we see through their lies. People like Lindsey Graham, which he was the main Republican pushing it hard in that committee hearing. Ted Cruz kind of hem-hawed around, maybe if it's done just right, it could help. I don't really know where he ultimately stands, but it seems like he was signaling weakness on it, which is not good, especially for someone like Ted Cruz, who has traditionally been very pro-Second Amendment. But for some reason right now, under the Trump administration, there's some behind the scenes push to get red flag gun confiscation passed now. I don't know why. I don't know why some people are suddenly shifting. But there's also this lie that the media keeps telling that, public opinion has shifted on gun control. That's a lie. I don't know anyone who would change their mind all because of what happened in Parkland, Florida, where a bunch of high schoolers were murdered. Again, it's sad, shouldn't happen, but how is that any more heartbreaking than Sandy Hook, where you had young, innocent children? So something weird is going on. They're trying to use this now when people have their guard down because everything's okay because Trump's in office, right? But it's not. So please take action using the Gun Owners of America link at gunowners.org. This has to be stopped, guys. This is going to be dangerous because they know if they try to pass a nationwide gun ban where they confiscate everybody's guns, that won't work out because we'll all band together, we'll all stick together. But if they pass red flag gun confiscation and single us out one by one and we think we're okay because we ain't done nothing, and that guy, over there, he must have done something stupid, so I ain't getting, involved in that. But then one day they show up at your door for a comment made online that was taken out of context on social media, or an allegation made against you. We're living in dangerous times, people. And some of the most dangerous times are when people who share your beliefs think everything is safe, when the sheep think everything's safe. That's usually when it's the least safe, when everyone has their guard down. So please, wake up, get active. I'll also have the phone numbers of the Senate Judiciary Committee members in the comments as well. Please call them. Please urge them to oppose this dangerous and blatantly unconstitutional legislation, regardless of how it's worded. It will be abused. It is about confiscating guns, and it already has been abused. And never forget, his name was Gary Willis, and I'm not trying to exploit the man's death, but this is why he was killed, because they came to take his guns, and he wasn't okay with that. The officer even said in the interview, he was okay with the police, he was okay with them being there, until they told him they were there to take his guns.
And I got to thinking, while I was on duty, to my fellow law enforcement officers, you need to think about this now. Are you really willing to kill someone who won't comply with this unconstitutional law? Are you really willing to kill someone to knowingly violate their constitutionally protected Second Amendment rights because politicians told you so over mere allegations and without due process? Are you really willing to kill a fellow American who doesn't want to just let you take their means of self-defense out the door and thousands of dollars out the door, when from what they know, they've done nothing wrong and they haven't been afforded due process? And conversely, are you really willing to risk your own life to violate someone's rights, to do wrong to someone? That'd be like getting killed while trying to rob someone. There's no honor in that. Yeah, we risk our lives when we go after bad guys and people who endanger other people. We risk our lives to try and save people. But do you really want to risk your life to die without honor, to wrong someone, to violate their rights, to take something that they legally paid for and lawfully paid for, that they earned with their hard money? A right that's protected by the Constitution that we all swore to uphold, when they haven't been afforded due process, when they haven't been convicted of a crime of harming another person? I'm not. Going home to my family is more important than enforcing the will of corrupt politicians. And also, my conscience and doing what is right by God is more important than the will of politicians. I don't want to live with something like that on my conscience. Taking the life of someone who hasn't hurt anybody, who may, for all intents and purposes, have been a good person, who simply didn't want to give up their right to bear arms when they haven't been convicted of a crime.
Thanks for watching. Oh, and if you're not doing it already, if you do a lot of shopping on Amazon, make sure you go through Amazon Smile and select the Gun Owners Foundation as the beneficiary to receive a portion of the proceeds from your purchase. Basically, the Gun Owners Foundation is an organization within the Gun Owners of America, and they use those proceeds to help fight against anti-gun laws in the courts, to fight against anti-gun legislation, and to advocate for pro-Second Amendment legislation. It doesn't take a lot of time, just a few extra seconds, and it adds up over time. You can also use the link included right here in this video. Thank you.